Hello everyone, this is Mathfinder, the home for every math nerd's Pathfinder optimization needs. If you're new here, welcome, and we're so glad to have you. If you've been here before, welcome back, and thank you so much for your continued support. Today's video is going to be on a short and fun topic. It's about Mystic Armour, a spell that is widely considered not that great in most discussions that I've seen. And I used it in a campaign purely for thematic reasons. I had no real optimization interest for doing so, and I felt like the spell was really good when I used it. And that led me to deep dive into, is the spell really good, or is it just as bad as everyone thinks it is? So let's find out. Before talking about Mystic Armour, though, I wanted to talk about CrystalMaggie, this video's sponsor. CrystalMaggie is a website where you can purchase some really pretty dice. I've seen a few of their latest collections. There is a Hollow Knight liquid core die that I thought was incredibly cool looking, and there's a whole variety of other really cool dice you can get. If you use the discount code in the video link below, you will get 10% off the entire order, and if you click it, they'll know that I sent you there. So if you're looking for dice for your upcoming campaign, make sure to check out CrystalMaggie and maybe consider buying a set from them. Back to the video. So to explain where I'm coming from with Mystic Armour being good, let's first do a one-shot proof of concept. This claim is going to sound insane, and I promise you I'm not insane. There is something I'm cooking here. 10th rank Mystic Armour specifically is a fantastic spell. Even if we ignore ranks 1 to 9, even if it's bad, I think I should be able to convince anyone that 10th rank Mystic Armour is a fantastic spell. And I don't just mean it's decent, I really do mean it's top tier. It has a pretty not flashy effect, and that makes a lot of people underrate it compared to a lot flashier and cooler and obviously more powerful looking 10th rank spells, like Conquering Soldiers, Fabricated Truth, Freeze Time, Manifestation, Nullify, Shadow Army, etc. These are all objectively powerful spells, and they're really flashy while doing so. And in fact, Mystic Armour's lack of flash might even make it look weaker than some other 10th rank spells that are pretty objectively not great, like Avatar or Fated Confrontation, because even if they're weak, they're flashy, whereas Mystic Armour is pretty damn boring. But consider this. Your +3 greater resilient armor, so the armor that will have +3 item bonus to your AC and +2 item bonus for your saves, will cost 24,000 to 26,000 gold pieces by level 18-ish. That variation happens because if you rune up your armor piece by piece, rather than buying +3 greater resilient armor all at once, like you would for, say, a one-shot, that's where that difference comes from. But that's the range of prices you would pay. Now your next upgrade to +3 major resilient, where your saving throws get a +3 item bonus, is between 46,000 to 50,000 gold pieces by level 20. That's the difference in cost you would pay for upgrading your armor to the next level. Now, let's say you were in a campaign and you choose to sell your +3 greater resilient armor. And in the case of a one-shot, you would just not buy it in the first place. You would get back half of the gold value of if you'd been upgrading this bit by bit along the way, 12,780 gold pieces, or in the case of a one-shot, you would win back 24,000 gold pieces worth of value. Therefore, casting a 10th rank Mystic Armour every single day is worth the price of the major resilient runes you did not buy, plus whatever you got from either selling or not having bought the lower rank armor in the first place. So in a campaign setting, it's worth roughly 62,000 gold pieces, whereas in a one-shot, it's worth 70,000 gold pieces, because the whole +3 major resilient armor was never bought in the first place. And here is where I can prove that Mystic Armour is a good 10th rank spell, because it is objectively worth many other 10th rank spells, because a 10th rank scroll costs 8,000 gold pieces. So if you're casting Mystic Armour every single day, you have effectively bought yourself 7 to 9 10th rank scrolls. All of that gold you would have spent either upgrading your greater resilient armor up to major resilient, or buying the whole set for a one-shot, you would simply not spend that gold, get some back in the case of a campaign by selling your +3 greater resilient armor, and you would have between 7 and 9 10th rank scrolls. So in many ways, isn't Mystic Armor performing better than having used those 10th rank spell slots on 10th rank spells other than Mystic Armor? Because think about it, if it's worth 7 to 9 10th rank scrolls, in your adventuring career, how many 10th rank spells are you casting? In a one-shot, you're almost certainly casting 2 at a maximum. But even if you're in a campaign setting, how many adventuring days do you have at level 20? I would guess you don't have that many. Once you're at that point, you're at the tail end of pretty much any campaign. You are approaching the point where you're going to have a few set-piece combats and end the story. If you stay at level 20 for more than 5 sessions, you're probably earning a whole bunch of gold that goes outside of the scope of the level 1 to 20 treasure table anyways, and what you do with that is a separate conversation. But if you're in a typical campaign that's ending around level 20, then 7 to 9 10th rank scrolls is actually more than likely going to be about double as many spell slots as you would have gotten on 10th rank spells if you had just cast them using your own slots. Like, let's say you have 4 adventuring days at level 20. The slot you used to cast Mystic Armor, if you had spent that on any other 10th rank spell, you would have cast 4 10th rank spells, because you got one of those slots per adventuring day. But using our Mystic Armor gave you 7 10th rank spells, which means you could not only cast as many as you would, you can actually cast a few more. You'd be casting another additional 10th rank spell per day, depending on the length of the adventure at level 20. So this is sort of the proof of concept that, yes, Mystic Armor has something to it, and I'm going to use this exact equation to build out our analysis. So how do we extend this analysis to be more broad-ranging across all the levels? Well, the key insight here is that the value of Mystic Armor varies depending on the number of adventuring days you will spend at any given level. And I use the word adventuring day lightly. Really, I just mean how many days are you going to have that you're spending spell slots in and then that night you're recovering them. Even if your GM is not balancing adventuring days for the party, because Pathfinder doesn't really expect you to do that. So going back to the 20th level example, if you spend 4 or fewer adventuring days at level 20, which I would say is pretty damn typical, like I said, 1 Mystic Armor was worth 2 or more additional 10th rank scrolls per day, which meant you came out ahead in the trade. Using the 10th rank slot on Mystic Armor meant you cast more 10th rank spells than if you had just used that slot on other 10th rank spells. Now let's extend this to the full level range of analysis. First, we're only going to be analyzing levels 5 to 20. This is because at levels 1 to 4, your spell slot actually puts you ahead of the math in some ways, so let's not account for that. Level 5 is where potency runes for armor first become available. We'll just do it a 1-to-1 comparison for Mystic Armor starting there. And then from there, we'll develop the math as follows. First, math out how much money a Mystic Armor at that rank saved you in terms of runes. We are assuming a character who starts at level 5 immediately buys potency runes, and then every time a potency or resilient rune becomes available, simply upgrades to that. So all you have to do is check the cost of that rune at that level, and that's what Mystic Armor saved you. Mark this as a marginal gain in gold value, so it is a change in gold value in the positive direction. Then convert this gold value to an equivalent number of spell scrolls equal to Mystic Armor's casting rank. So at level 5, when you're casting a first rank Mystic Armor, you would take the price of a rank 1 scroll, and then you take the price of, say, the +1 potency rune, divide it by the price of a rank 1 scroll, and that's the number of scroll value you attained. At higher levels, you would simply use a higher level rune and divide that by the scroll cost at that point. Then let's assume a rate of expenditure for scrolls per level. If you're taking that gold that you saved from Mystic Armor and funneling it into scrolls, we have to assume you're actually using those scrolls. And we are going to have 3 different tracks in our math. A slow track, which is 2 scrolls expended per level, a medium, which is 3 per level, and a fast one, which is 4 per level. And remember, when I say n per level, what I mean is you're having n days per level where you were down to your last slot, used it, and then used whatever scroll you had prepared for this eventuality. This is an oversimplification for the sake of math, but I think it still makes sense because there are going to be light adventuring days. There are going to be days when you just had 1 or 2 encounters and ended up just never using this max rank scroll that you bought with the gold that Mystic Armor saved you. And there will be different campaign paces. There are some campaigns where you're going to hit that fast progression much more often, and others where slow is going to be the worst it ever gets, and many days are just going to be better than slow. And finally, we're going to say that at levels where Mystic Armor is not a maximum rank slot, we're simply not expending a scroll. Because think about it, when you're level 5 or 6, you're not going to be buying rank 1 scrolls to replace that extra slot that Mystic Armor was spent on. Realistically, you were already investing in things like focus spells and stabs that would help you cover up for whatever low rank slots you might be lacking in. So we're only going to have expenditure in the level range where Mystic Armor represents a maximum rank slot, because when it does, you're actually down a really valuable resource. Whereas when it's a slot that's 1 or 2 ranks below your maximum, it's not that valuable and not something you would spend a disproportionate amount of gold to cover up on. And then we would mark the expended value of scrolls as a marginal loss. On the slide, I made an error. We're not marking gold value loss, we're marking scroll value loss, because we already converted the gold value gain into a number of scrolls, remember? So now we can just mark the loss in terms of scrolls. The reason I'm doing all this math in terms of scrolls is because first, when I tried to do it based purely on gold value, I got really misleading results because gold growth is exponential. And the way that ended up looking is that high levels were so dominating in the amount of gold you spend / save that it was impossible to draw meaningful insights about the lower level range. But by normalizing it against the value of a spell scroll, we can now get a value that's comparable for all levels. The insight you draw for level 5 is as applicable as what you would get at level 20 because it's put in a number of scrolls of a certain rank. Whereas if you had gone for gold value, you would have been saying at level 5 you saved 160 gold, whereas at level 20 you saved 50,000 gold, and that's impossible to actually compare fairly. And when you crunch all of that math, this chart is what it ends up looking like. The horizontal axis is the level range from 5 to 20. The vertical axis represents the number of scrolls that you have gained or lost, positive or negative, by that level. And remember, the value of a scroll changes. At levels 5 to 6, we're talking about a rank 1 scroll. Whereas at levels 7 to 8, we're talking about a 4th rank scroll. There are 3 curves on this graph. The blue represents a slow expenditure, 2 scrolls spent per level at levels where you would be spending those scrolls. So for example, at levels 5 to 6, we're not really accounting for scroll expenditure because it's a rank 1 Mystic Armor. Pretty cheap, you're probably not replacing with a scroll. The orange graph represents medium expenditure, 3 per level, and green represents fast expenditure, 4 per level. At levels 5 to 6, these are identical because, like I said, you're not expending any scrolls. And then you start to see the differences. The blue graph is actually just positive the whole way through. You always stay at a relative 5 or higher, dipping only to a little bit under 5 to like 4 point something-ish between levels 16 to 18. The orange graph is less positive, but still positive the whole way through other than level 16 to 18. At level 16 to 18, you actually do go into the negatives, but aside from that, you're always at plus 2-ish scrolls relative to where you are. So Mystic Armor, in both the slow and medium expenditure cases, almost always represents a significant gain in the amount of gold saved. The green graph, the fast expenditure, is the only one that spends most of the level range in the negatives. Levels 12 plus, it is squarely into the negatives and never really recovers, with level 16 to 18 being pretty bad. Now, I understand that number of scrolls is a really arbitrary seeming metric to use, but again, like I said, it actually makes more sense than evaluating absolute gold quantities, because otherwise it really massively boosts the impact of high level play and kind of ignores how Mystic Armor scales throughout the level range. This gives us a much better measure. Future Mathfinder here. While editing, I came up with a much less confusing explanation for why scroll value is a valid metric, especially with that weird mix-up of me constantly saying I was using rank 1 scrolls, but actually using rank 3 scrolls for levels 5 to 6. Basically, gold prices in this game have an inflation as you get into higher level play. Earning 160 gold pieces at level 5 is not as valuable as earning 160 gold pieces at level 19. It just isn't. In fact, if you go by the item prices table on page 133 of the GM core, earning 160 gold pieces at level 5 is closer in value to 40,000 gold pieces at level 19. This is what makes absolute gold value basically completely irrelevant. By the time you reach higher level play, the gold you saved at lower levels basically doesn't matter, and neither does the gold you spent. But that gold would still have had an impact at those levels of play. So when we normalize the gold saved by not buying a rune and divide it by the price of a maximum rank scroll, what we're doing is manufacturing a purchasing power metric. That's why even at level 5, it's correct to use a rank 3 scroll, even though Mystic Armor is rank 1, because buying a bunch of rank 1 scrolls is not really representative of what you could do with the gold at rank 3. Obviously, not all lower level items fall off. You could still buy silver bullets, utility spells, etc. in super low rank scrolls. And yes, that means this purchasing power metric is not perfect, but it's still useful. Also note that the price of each max rank scroll is at the top end of consumable item prices, just like fundamental runes are at the top end of permanent magic items prices. That's another point in favor of this being a pretty useful purchasing power metric. I hope this explanation made sense. Let's continue with the video. My takeaway here would be that Mystic Armor, if you're casting it from whatever spell slot is available as soon as you can for the maximum possible value, the gold you save by not buying runes is usually worth several scrolls off the rank you expended the Mystic Armor on. And it's only at a fast expenditure, that is, at every level you have 4 or more adventuring days where you're running dry on slots of that rank and are dipping into those scrolls, that you should be considering not using Mystic Armor when looking purely from a lens of gold saved. This is pretty staggering. Mystic Armor is so often dismissed as a useless spell, but look, it's just a great spell. It's a great way to save some value. And scrolls aren't the only thing you can spend your gold on. More on that later. And even the green graph in that second half of the level range isn't as bad as it looks. Because yes, you are dipping into the negatives at levels 12 and higher. But levels 12 and higher are also the level ranges where it kind of doesn't matter that you're dipping into the negatives, because you can just not expend those scrolls as well. You can just take that gold and instead of spending it on spell scrolls to offset the spell slot you spend Mystic Armor on, you can spend that gold on other things, other permanent items, staves, spell hearts, etc. Items you may not have had the gold to spare if you had chosen to just buy resilient and potency runes. And by the time you reach level 12, you have so many 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th rank spell slots that it almost doesn't matter that you're spending a maximum rank spell slot on Mystic Armor. Like, yes, I'm going to cast one less slow 6 in the day. I still have Wall of Stone. I still have Corrosive Mock. I still have Cinder Swarm. I still have Tortoise and the Hare. So even if on paper the green line is dipping heavily into the negatives, it isn't as bad as it looks. My takeaway from the chart is that Mystic Armor is well worth the amount of gold it's saving you. But of course, there are factors other than gold, aren't there? For our analysis to be complete, we do need to talk about factors other than gold. If you look just at the gold, Mystic Armor is a top tier spell because it's saving you so much gold that no matter what spell you argue is better than Mystic Armor, Mystic Armor technically beats that spell in the White Room because you can just use Mystic Armor and then buy that many more scrolls of whatever spell you said was better than that rank of Mystic Armor, right? And this argument can be applied an infinite number of times. Literally, no matter what spell you pick, that argument will be true. Therefore, Mystic Armor would be kind of by default the best spell in any campaign that doesn't have a really harsh pace of attrition. But that's where these other downsides come in to sort of balance Mystic Armor. For one, it locks you into Explorer's Clothing. Let's assume you have a maxed out Dexterity at level 1, plus 3, and then you're increasing it every chance you get. So at level 5, it becomes plus 4. At level 15, it becomes plus 5. Well, then compared to light or medium armor AC, assuming the dex cap has been hit, you will be 1 point behind at levels 1 to 4 because you are 2 away from your dex cap, but you do have a +1 item bonus that the others don't, and that means you'll be 1 behind. At levels 5 to 14, you will still be 1 behind because now you're 1 away from your dex cap, but that potency rune item bonus has equalized. And finally, at levels 15 to 20, you're going to be even because your dex has finally hit the dex cap of 5. This is a meaningful but small downside. As a cloth caster, you're going to be 1 point behind medium armor AC, which is fine, honestly. I would recommend trying to avoid the melee if you're relying on Mystic Armor, but this is not something that is devastating. The next downside is a lot bigger. You cannot etch your Explorer's Clothing with property runes while relying on Mystic Armor. This is because property runes key off of your item having an actual item bonus, which Mystic Armor does not give you. It gives you kind of a shimmering magical field that has its own item bonus and dexterity cap and whatnot, but it doesn't apply that item bonus to an item you're wearing, therefore property runes will not work on there. And there are some good property runes you might miss out on. For example, property runes tend to be one of the best ways to get an unconditional stealth bonus, and stealth is a valuable skill for a lot of spellcasters because it helps them bypass their otherwise bad initiative. And this sort of works against that. That being said, this is not a downside you cannot work around, because you can always just wear +1 Explorer's Clothing at the much higher level and then put whatever property rune you want, and the +1 is now kind of dirt cheap to you. You could spend some of that gold you saved on buying a much lower level potency rune, and then just apply any property runes that are crucial to your build onto that. You can apply to your Explorer's Clothing, your Bands of Force, whatever. So this is not the end of the world, but again, a meaningful downside. And finally, there is a downside that will feel like the end of the world when it does happen. Your armor can be dispelled. If an enemy casts Dispel Magic on you, it might just disappear. And this can be quite brutal in high-level play because some enemies who have a tendency to show up as bosses, have auto-dispelling strikes, where when they hit you once per turn, they get a free action Dispel Magic, and that evaporating your armor will feel horrible. And I want to note this explicitly as a downside, but I have to mention that this actually is paired with an upside, where there are also enemies who have armor-rending attacks. There are enemies who break your armor with something like, say, adamantine jaws or claws. Mystic Armor is immune to that because you don't have a physical armor, it's just magic. Whereas anyone relying on Resilient runes is going to be screwed over by that. Unless you have adamantine armor yourself, it is most likely going to go down in a single crit. So while this is a devastating downside, I don't think this is enough to make Mystic Armor bad because it's niche and an equivalent of it exists even for non-Mystic Armor cases. So really, it's just a matter of, yeah, you got real unlucky with one specific enemy that your GM chose. You kind of got to deal with that, and that's going to happen no matter what type of armor you use. Still, the sum total of these means that Mystic Armor has legitimate downsides that you should consider before you go into deciding if you want to use Mystic Armor or not. Does it replace your armor progression or not? And that brings us to our final verdict. So first up, in one-shots, you should almost always consider using Mystic Armor. This is because buying magic armor, either with your lump sum of gold or by expending a pretty high level item slot for your treasure for that level is just going to be worth a lot of the treasure budget you get for that game. And if you can instead just expend a spell slot on it, you're gonna feel much better. This is especially true in very high level play, where you might have a lot of cool items you're considering. It might make the difference between you getting the grimoires and staves that you want that otherwise you would not have access to. So in one-shots, pretty much anytime you're playing a spellcasting character in one-shots, consider Mystic Armor. It is very often a mistake to just not consider it. Secondly, as a Gish, I would say it's almost never worth using Mystic Armor because if you're running into melee, you kind of want that maxed out AC. For levels 1 to 15, you're not gonna have that. At levels 15 plus, sure, you might consider it still, but by that point, you have now invested into your build, you probably have some property runes, it's kind of hard to spec out of it at that point. And at levels 1 to 14, I would never recommend using Mystic Armor over just having maxed out AC, because you're a spellcaster trying to dive into melee. You need every advantage that can come your way. But any non-Gish caster, especially one that is not super reliant on spell slots, should consider it. This means that Druid, despite having medium armor by default, might want to consider Mystic Armor because, yeah, you're 1 AC behind what you would have been if you had a runed up medium armor piece on you, but then all that gold you saved can give you a staff you really want, several scrolls you really want, spell catalysts you really want, mutagens you really want, etc. If you're a spellcaster that relies heavily on your spell slots, like say a wizard or a sorcerer, this consideration becomes more tenuous. I wouldn't always pick it, but it's still worth thinking about, especially in high level play. And that is where you should consider that it is level dependent. At levels 1 to 4, Mystic Armor is actually pretty damn good. If you're not able to get access to light or medium armor, or if you just thematically don't want to use it, Mystic Armor brings you to 1 point of medium armor rather than 2 points away from it, which is a valuable consideration. At this level range, my light and medium armor casters would just prefer to wear the actual armor, but if you don't have armor, it is definitely worth considering Mystic Armor here. At levels 5 to 14, it's a toss-up. It's not going to be amazing, but it's not going to be bad. You should use it if you want to. You should use it if you have other plans in mind for the gold that you're not spending on your runes, and you should keep in mind that you are incurring some downsides to save up that gold. At level 15 to 18, it's not doing much in attrition-heavy games. And this is kind of the point where if your campaign is only kind of passing through levels 15 to 18, you're going to feel a little bit of a downside. But if it's a campaign where the majority of your focus is in that range, or if it's like a mini arc, like 3 or 4 sessions in that range, and then you're just calling it there, you may want to not consider Mystic Armor at all, because it's not going to shine there, it's not going to save you that much gold there, and it's good otherwise. Like, it's still giving you full progression AC at this point, right? Because your dex is maxed out, but given that it's not saving you gold and comes with some other downsides, it's not doing so great in that specific level range. And then at levels 19 to 20, it's fantastic. It's so good that if you were in a campaign where you got from level 1 to 18 without ever using Mystic Armor, you should still consider using it. You should consider selling off existing runed up armor. You should consider just forgetting about your property runes. You should consider retraining out of any feats that got you into light or medium armor. Do all of that and then just use Mystic Armor as a 10th rank spell, because it is so good that it is worth many more 10th rank spells, unless, again, you're in a very attrition heavy game or a game that's going to stay at level 20 for a really long time. And finally, remember, I have expressed the cost in scrolls, but gold can be used for many things, not just scrolls. I alluded to that earlier. Not spending gold on runes frees up your gold for other things. When I was playing my wizard, between levels 1 to, say, 13-ish, I was mostly just using resilient runes and potency runes to upgrade my armor. Once I hit that higher level range, I realized there are a lot of things I want to buy with my gold. There are so many different staves, and I wanted a runed up weapon, for example, because I had bow proficiency. I wanted a really valuable staff, and I wanted to get it on par. I didn't want to pick up the staff 2 levels later where it's kind of fallen off in value. I wanted to pick up many spell catalysts. I wanted to get my Apex item, and in fact get multiple Apex items and then just use all of their activated abilities. I wanted access to my focused item. I wanted retrieval belts, and I wanted to keep upgrading all of these items as soon as possible at the expense of my runes. And for a while, I considered just letting my runes lag behind a little and upgrading them later. But then I realized I just don't have to upgrade them. I can just sell them, get a bunch of gold to spend on all these other things I want, and then I just use Mystic Armor to cover up the weakness. So really, your use of Mystic Armor boils down to, do you have a plan for the gold you're gonna save? Because if you do, it's well worth using. And I will note here, even if you don't have a plan for the whole level range of how you're going to spend gold, Mystic Armor is a good stopgap if you're not going to get to shop right away, or if for any reason you don't have gold during a shopping session but then need to go out for an adventure. Like, there's always those awkward zones where you have reached a level where you could afford a Resilient rune or a Potency rune, and you're just kind of not able to get it, right? And you can use Mystic Armor to bridge the gap whenever needed, and then just upgrade as soon as you get a chance to, and then just forget about Mystic Armor once you have those upgrades. So that'll be all for today's video, folks. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope if you've never really given the spell a close look before, you will now. It is a subtly powerful spell. It is boring. It doesn't really do much on its own. It's just a numbers boost, and not even a numbers boost that pulls you ahead of the game's math. But Pathfinder's math can work in subtle ways, and if you know how to use the gold you save, it will feel like it's pulling ahead. My wizard felt like I was pulling ahead because I knew how to spend that gold on things that actually help. And hey, that's making me realize, I think I owe you all a video on itemizing your characters, because itemization is sort of an underexplored part of online discourse. So maybe that's a video that'll come up in the future. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, I hope you like and comment. If you'd like to see my future videos, please subscribe and click the notifications bell. And of course, if you can, join a channel membership, because it is the most direct way to support me. Regardless, I hope to see you next time. Mathfinder out.